Hey everyone, Alec from Shape Gaming here. Have you always wanted to try to healer, but been too worried about not letting your team die or getting harassed for not being good enough? If I can speak to your concerns on behalf of every other healer out there, if your team probably died, it's probably because the tank decided that he was going to go all Leroy Jenkins and not use any defensive cooldowns.
Let's do this! Leroy Jenkins!
And to those DPS, it's probably their own fault for dying anyways because they're not good enough to stand out of the fire. All joking aside, I want to walk you through 5 tips worth considering if you're looking to main a healer, or if you simply are looking to get back into healing in World of Warcraft Dragonflight. I hope that by the time that you get through this video, you decide to continue healing, because without healers, we all know that silly DPS die even quicker when there's no healer to save them from themselves. The first tip you want to consider when determining what healer you want to main is to determine what types of content you enjoy healing. Do you like raiding with a large group of friends or guildies, or do you enjoy the time crunch in smaller group compositions of Mythic Plus dungeons? Or is bashing your face on your keyboard while you're stun locked to death in PvP more your thing? While most, if not all, of the healers can be suitable in raids, Mythic Plus, and PvP, the content in which you want to heal may help in narrowing your list, because there are certainly healers that are better at different types of content than their counterparts. Once you determine the content that you plan to play, the second tip is really where you need to spend time determining what kind of player you see yourself as and how dedicated you want to be to this game. It's important to do a little self-reflection here. Are you a player that is looking to play at a casual or possibly semi-hardcore level, or are you looking to be competitive and min-max your healing? If you're looking at playing casually or semi-hardcore, I would suggest that any healer will meet your needs, and you should focus your energy on the next 2 tips to help you make a decision on which of the 7 healing specs is for you, because any of the current healers are viable across the casual and semi-hardcore level, regardless of what type of content you enjoy. If you're someone looking to play more competitively, or like to challenge yourself, then you'll need to begin thinking about your choices. You'll need to select a healer that has a playstyle that you enjoy, while also being something that you can see yourself putting the time into learning how to play well. The next tip worth considering when picking your healer main is to think about the particular healer's playstyle. What I mean by playstyle, in my mind, is breaking the healers into 2 different categories. The first is the type of healing that they do. Heal over time versus hard cast versus damage focused. Heal over time focused healers are exactly that. They're healers that perform a majority of their healing using heal over time spells, often referred to as HOTS. The only healer that I consider to fit purely into the hot focus category is Restoration Druid. Moving into the hard cast focus healers, these healers are those that perform a majority of their healing by hard casting spells that typically take between 1 to 3 seconds to cast. The healers that fit into this category are Holy Priest, Restoration Shaman, and Preservation Evoker. These healers do have heal over time spells and instant cast spells. However, a majority of their healing is done by hard casting on their party, which is why I feel that they best fit here. The final category is damage focus healers, is a bit more nebulous because they tend to perform most of their healing through use of damage rotation, although they have a mix of HOTS and hard casting spells. These healers are your Discipline Priest, Holy Paladin, and Mistweaver Monk. One caveat about these healers is that I think Holy Paladin and Mistweaver could also fall into the hard caster category, and they in fact have builds that support that playstyle. However, the ability to heal with a mix of HOTS, hard casted abilities, and damage puts them in a different category for me. Another consideration when looking at these healers, and one that I find often becomes more important to people than hot versus hard cast versus damage playstyle, is whether the healer is a melee healer or a ranged healer. Part of this determination comes down to the fact that melee healers have another level of difficulty to them, because you have to be more aware of your surroundings, such as ground effects, mob cleave attacks, and other factors, while still trying to heal your party. This is an important playstyle to take into consideration, because you may like Holy Paladin, but can't stand the thought of playing in melee, and oftentimes the distaste for melee playstyle will make sticking to your Holy Paladin difficult, often leading you to pick up a new character altogether. Unlike the groupings above, this category is easier to define across the healers. Melee healers consist of Holy Paladin and Mistweaver Monk. Again, although these classes have a ranged healer build, they are really meant to play most optimally when in melee. On the other hand, ranged healers consist of Holy and Discipline Priest, Restoration Druid, and Preservation Evoker. Now you may be saying, well, you forgot about Restoration Druid, and you'd be right. Restoration Druid is a healer that falls into both melee and range depending on how Blizzard wants to tune their damage. Oftentimes you can get away with being ranged and purely cast Sunfire or Moonfire and contribute a large amount of damage that way. However, in order to play Resto Druid most optimally, druids out there would argue that you should be cat weaving, which is laying down your Sunfires and then performing most of your damage rotation in melee in cat form. Now that you've looked at the previous tips and have narrowed your search down, you'll want to consider the difficulty and skill ceiling that comes with each healer. Ultimately, some healers are easier to play while others are harder, and some healers have a lower skill ceiling or have less potential to perform at high levels, while others have almost unlimited potential depending on how well you can play the class. Similar to the previous tip, let's break these healers down starting with one of my all-time favorite healers, Restoration Shaman. Resto Shaman has a low to moderate difficulty and skill ceiling, especially now that Vesper Totem will not be available in Dragonflight. They have an easy rotation of casting Healing Rain, Riptides, and then Healing Wave, Healing Surge, and or Chain Heal depending on the content and situation. Their damage rotation is also similarly simplistic. The reason Restoration Shaman has a moderate skill ceiling is that their utility and totems are really where the most of their skill and nuance comes from. You have to spend some time learning how to time your Cloudburst totems, when to use Spiritling Totem, when you need to talent into Earthen Wall Totem versus Tremor Totem, etc. Overall, the Restoration Shaman is a beginner-friendly healer and is especially great with keeping pugs alive if you don't have a lot of friends or guildmates to play with. Holy Priest is the next healer that we're going to look at, and I would say that they also fall into the low to moderate difficulty and skill ceiling. Like Resto Shamans, Holy Priest have an easy rotation for both their healing and damage cycles. They're a class that mixes hard casting healing and damage, and then mixes in instant cast Holy Words to fill in the gaps or perform harder hitting heals. Their moderate skill ceiling comes mostly from the need to learn how to manage your hard cast and instant cast spells, since your hard casted spells reduce the cooldown of your instant Holy Word spells. Overall, if you're looking for another beginner-friendly healer, Holy Priest is another great spec for you and is equally, if not better for pugs than Resto Shaman. Transitioning over to Mistweaver Monk, this is another class that has a low to moderate difficulty and skill ceiling with the potential to have a slightly higher skill ceiling. The rotation for Mistweaver isn't too challenging, however your damage is performed in melee. The challenges that come with this class is understanding when your DPS is enough to heal the group versus when you have to back off to hard cast spells. The other thing that has historically been difficult for this class is managing mana, particularly in a Mythic Plus situation. Overall, this class is fun to play and not super difficult to pick up as a beginner. It will take a little while to get used to the mix of damage and healing. However, this class is normally not too punishing to newer players and when playing in pugs, as long as you can drink mana between bad pulls. Moving to Preservation Evoker, if I'm being quite honest, this is not a spec that I've spent too much time playing, so take my advice with a grain of salt. Based on the reviews and other healing community input I've seen, this class seems like one that has a low difficulty and a low to moderate skill ceiling. The rotation is fairly simple, and they have an easier time burst healing a group pack up from large damage events, which makes healing pugs less of a concern. Their damage profile is also good and well suited for Mythic Plus dungeons. Overall, most players that I've seen believe this class will perform well in Dragonflight, making it a good healer main. Looking now at Restoration Druid, I feel that this spec can be anywhere from a low to moderate difficulty with a moderate to high skill ceiling. The rotation for healing and damage is pretty simple at face value, and the class has great cooldowns to assist with unexpected damage events. However, this class has the potential to have a high skill ceiling. To be great at this spec, you need to understand the best stat weights, which hots, and how many of them are enough to get your group healed up while also allowing you time to perform your melee damage rotation. The spec also has one of the best utility toolkits if you're planning to focus on Mythic Plus content. Overall, this spec can be good for beginners and is certainly strong for those players that want to play competitive and really take the time to master a healing spec. Moving over to our final melee healer, let's take a look at Holy Paladin. This is a class that has a moderate difficulty with a moderate to potentially high skill ceiling. Holy Paladins are a build spender class with a mix of melee and some hard casted abilities. What I mean by that is that they use melee spells and hard casted spells to build holy power that they then can decide to use to do more damage or to use on instant cast healing spells. To play this class well, you need to understand when and how to effectively spend your holy power. This class also can be cooldown dependent and has a ton of group utility that you need to learn to use effectively to play it to the best of its abilities. Overall, this spec is a lot of fun, but takes some practice getting used to the builder-spender rotation and melee playstyle. Finally, let's talk about Disciplined Priest. I would argue that Disciplined Priest is one of the most challenging healers with one of the highest skill ceilings. The rotation for this class is fairly challenging because the majority of your healing depends on setting up for damage using several global cooldowns, and then dealing damage to provide group healing through Atonement. Playing this class to the best of its ability requires both a coordinated group, and it also requires you to have a good knowledge of the raid and or dungeon in order to set up and prepare for large damage events. Although this class and rotation can be fun, it can be extremely punishing if you play with uncoordinated groups because it's hard to catch up from unexpected damage. With classes like Resto Shaman and Holy Priest, you can brute force your team back up to healthy using your spells and maybe a cooldown, whereas a Disciplined Priest normally takes several global cooldowns to attempt to catch a party's health back up. I would suggest not taking on this class as your first healer unless you're willing to put in the time to learn it well, and you're not playing with pugs. Now that we spent time discussing what content you'd like to approach as a healer and what type of healer you might be most interested in based on playstyle, playstyle. The most important tip I can give you is to ignore the meta and to pick something you enjoy. It's easy to jump on YouTube and try to watch all the tier lists that are out there to help you pick a healer. While these tier lists can be informational and helpful, they often end up making you more confused or second guessing your decision of which healer to play. Ultimately, most of these tier lists are geared towards the upper 1% of players. Remember that any of the specs we looked at above can be played at competitive level across any type of content. What's most important is that you play a healer that you enjoy and that you find fun to play. Those two attributes are the most important things that will keep you healing when those DPS stand in fire and then spam you for letting them die in the group wiping. We all know that this community in the game always needs more healers, and I want to ensure that you pick a healer that you'll enjoy playing throughout all of Dragonflight and any expansions to come. I hope that you found this content enjoyable and helpful in guiding you to a healer that you'll enjoy maining in Dragonflight. If you have any questions or feedback, please drop them in the comments section below. And as always, I'd appreciate you liking the video and subscribing to help the channel grow. Until next time.